And now we will go into an overview of neurological disabilities, such as multiple sclerosis, stroke, traumatic brain injury, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Multiple sclerosis is a degenerative condition where the immune system of your body attacks the insulation to the nerves. This can lead to varying degrees of impairment, such as musculoskeletal impairment, decreases in motor control and motor function, decreases in balance, fatigue that is generally worse throughout the day, depression, anxiety, urinary incontinence, and depending on where the dysfunctions may occur, visual disturbances. Issues with regards to multiple sclerosis that are important for volunteers to take into account during sport and recreation events include heat intolerance in making sure the individual does not spend excessive amount of time in the sun or in high temperature environments, making sure that the individual, if they have anything that's harder to do, they do it in the morning, making sure that the individual receives frequent rest breaks and proper hydration, but taking into account the fact that they may have urinary incontinence. Hi, Joe. How are you doing today?
Good.
Thanks for taking the time to speak with us today. So as you've already discussed, you were diagnosed with MS in 1999. So we know that there's multiple subtypes of MS. Some have more of a progressive trajectory without any real exacerbations and then recovery. Some have what seems to be stable progressions for years and then can have exacerbations. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your subtype?
Sure. I was diagnosed in '99. I didn't have a lot of problems early on. Later on, I developed some issues with fatigue and leg strength and neuropathy in my feet, and balance was a big issue for me as well. So I thought it was best to start using a power chair so that I was safer and I could manage my fatigue level as well.
Now, for a number of individuals that have MS, heat tends to be a big issue. Is that a problem for you when you're playing sports or doing other recreational activities?
Big time, yeah. Heat will wipe me out, and that also exacerbates fatigue and some blurred vision, which was an early issue with me. So yeah, heat is a big time problem.
And some individuals have a lot more energy, let's say, in the morning as opposed to the evening. Do you find that that's an issue?
Yeah, in the mornings I'm actually physically and cognitively I'm a lot stronger. My voice is actually stronger in the morning than it is in the afternoon as well.
How about as far as, do you notice that it might wipe you out for not only the rest of that day, but maybe even the next day or day after?
Oh yeah, big time. I refer to it as having a cell phone that won't take a charge, if you will.
So what types of sport and recreation activities do you feel afford you the most enjoyment with the least risk for that chronic fatigue in days to come?
Bowling is a good one for me, as long as I have some type of support that works with me, and also fishing. It's something I truly enjoy doing. Again, as long as I'm not out in the sun too long, and as long as I'm not too far away from the bathroom, because urinary incontinence is a big time issue for me as well.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever had an experience with a volunteer that you would categorize as negative, or something that they tried to force you to do that you knew wasn't the best for you based on your condition?
Sure, I've had people give me the old, but you look so normal kind of statement with MS. I've had volunteers try to say, but you'll be much more comfortable out in the sun, which obviously isn't a good thing for someone who's heat sensitive. And I've also had people, when I can stand, because if I stand up, just to stretch my legs because of spasticity and some other issues, they'll literally walk over to someone else and say, I think he's just faking because he can stand.
So what types of positive interactions have you had with volunteers during these same sporting and recreation activities?
It's just really them just asking me some of the things that I'd like to have support with, some of the things that they would want to just help me with, but ask me what I want to have help with and what I want to try to do on my own.
Mm-hmm. As far as hydration, do you feel that you get enough hydration?
That's a double-edged sword. You know, hydration is good for fatigue and heat, but with urinary incontinence, it's I'm making sure that I'm close to a bathroom.
Now, have you ever pushed through activities where you knew you should not have and then paid the price for it later?
Oh, big time, yeah. I'll push through things and you get heat exhaustion and fatigue, cognitive issues, and then for days I'm trying to recover from that. Again, it's like the cell phone battery that won't take a good charge.
And what are some tips or pearls that you could give new volunteers for working with someone with MS?
Just understand that each one of us with this disease are a little bit different. We all carry kind of different kind of challenges, and just talking to us about what those things might be is a good way to understand some of the ways that could support us.
Great. Thank you very much, Joe. Generally speaking, stroke is caused by a lack of blood flow and therefore oxygen to regions of the brain. Common causes are some type of obstruction like a clot or some type of bleed in the brain that occurs. Depending on the area of the brain that's affected, musculoskeletally, we generally see some type of motor dysfunction or paralysis on one side of the body. Sometimes it can affect the arm more than the leg more than the arm, but generally it's seen to affect one side of the body more than the other side of the body. Also, depending on the regions of the brain that are affected, we could have issues with cognition, reasoning, speech, or vision. Traumatic brain injury is caused by some type of trauma, whether that be blunt force trauma, moving too quickly, or a penetrating object. Much like stroke, the dysfunction depends on what area of the brain is affected, and generally we see either a mild traumatic brain injury, which is also known as a concussion, a moderate traumatic brain injury, or a severe traumatic brain injury. Traumatic brain injuries can affect musculoskeletal systems, can affect cognition or sensation, depending on the area of the brain that is affected and depending on the severity of the damage. In regards to stroke and traumatic brain injury, some of the things that will be most important for volunteers at sport and recreation events are balance, mobility, perception, and memory. Depending on the area of the brain that's affected, those individuals could have significant balance losses, have significant motor or strength function losses, as well as having a hard time remembering instructions or being able to understand the volunteer. So the volunteer must show a great amount of patience in some cases, repeat themselves, and be there to make sure that that individual is not going to fall or injure themselves in any way. Post-traumatic stress disorder can result from being engaged in a traumatic event or witnessing a traumatic event or even hearing about a traumatic event. A misnomer to PTSD is that you have to be a combat-related veteran or have experienced combat to suffer from PTSD. This is untrue, as anyone that has either been part of a traumatic event or witnessed a traumatic event can suffer from symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. They can include flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, anxiety, and inability to re-engage in society. These symptoms can last for varying amounts of times and perhaps never go away. Volunteers need to be very alert to symptoms of individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder. There could be different events that would cause flashbacks, that would increase hypervigilance, or send them into a downward spiral where they would no longer appear at any other events. Things that are important for volunteers to take into consideration while supporting individuals with PTSD at different sporting and recreation events are things that could potentially lead to an exacerbation of their symptoms. These could include starter pistols, tires popping, screeching tires, loud noises, screaming, and unknown or inappropriate physical contact. It is important to address those individuals from the front, Make sure you gain eye contact and make sure that they are willing to accept any type of physical contact. If you approach from behind or from the side and startle that individual, that could exacerbate their symptoms. It is important to keep in mind that one of the documented causes of post-traumatic stress disorder is sexual trauma and sexual harassment. These individuals may have a preference on volunteers that they are willing or not willing to work with. The volunteer should never take this personally and should always note that it is independent of age, race, sexual orientation, or gender.